to get into dentistry, you have to be extremely smart and you have to get really, really high scores. And then when you actually get into dentistry, it's a huge learning curve that everyone goes through, because all of a sudden you're bunched up with all these people who are the smartest of the 1%, the top 1% of the 1%, where we're competing on over a minute percent for a score to get into the actual course. So all of a sudden you're put in a cohort like that, and all of a sudden you're not the best anymore, because usually when you go to your school, you're one of the top students because that's what it takes. But then you're put together with all the other really top students. All of a sudden you're only getting passes instead of your A pluses and things like that. And that's something that really has an effect on a lot of people because they're so used to being achievers.
Do you want to earn more? Work less and enjoy what you do each day. It's no secret, it can be done. This podcast with Dr. T will not only educate and inspire you, it will also teach you how to do more and be more with the time you already have. It will be like a shot of adrenaline straight into the heart of your business. Here is your host, Tyson Franklin.
Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of It's No Secret with Dr. T. With me today is Jeffrey Tho, T-H-O, in case you're wondering how it's spelt. And he is a former two-time Australian Commonwealth Games athlete. He's a dentist, and he's also a business owner and coach, and he helps people reach their goals. So, Jeff, how are you doing today?
I'm going fantastic, thanks, Tyson. How are you?
I'm good. It's we only met, what was it, a month and a half ago, I think it was, down on the Gold Coast?
Yeah, about that, yeah. In the Gold Coast, yeah, that's right.
At Dr Jesse Green's event with Practice Max. And through our conversations, I found out that you have been to 2 Commonwealth Games, which I think is amazing that you can do that and at the same time study dentistry. How did you put the two together?
Yeah, look, it was hard work. I had a lot of, I had to manage my time really, really well. The Commonwealth Games I went to were in 2010 in New Delhi and also in 2014 in Glasgow. I guess the way around it is when you're an athlete and when you're trying to study and be a student, it's just really important that you're using your time to the best of your ability and you're not wasting time. And while you're doing something, you need 100% in that your mind can't be elsewhere. Otherwise, you're not really going to be focused. You're not going to get anything done. So, yeah, it was a lot of work, but at the end of the day, it was something that I really loved doing. So, yeah, really proud of that and really happy that I've done it all.
So, like, I remember being a student myself, and I do recall going to lectures, and then in between lectures, you would have sometimes 3-hour gaps. Sometimes during those 3-hour gaps, occasionally, a few of us would end up at the pub and having a few beers. So, while we were doing that, you were studying, so that therefore, during other times, you could actually train as an athlete.
Yeah, that's right. So I would train basically in the morning before uni, and with uni for dentistry, it was very full on. It was 30 plus hours per week.
Yeah. So
I was doing a lot of my training very early in the morning at about 5:30 a.m. and then straight away at nighttime after I finished. So yeah, it was very, very hectic, but managed to do it. It's something, yeah, like I said, you've got to manage your time really well and use every hour that you've got. I did have a bit of fun on my Friday nights and Saturday nights at uni as well. I had to have a bit of a social life as well. So I did go down to the pub for a few sneaky beverages, but not too often, and especially not when there was something important coming up. So
what was it like at what age did you realise that you were good enough in sport, in badminton, to know that, you know what, I think I could actually make it to the Commonwealth Games? Or did somebody else tell you were good enough?
It was kind of an ongoing thing. I was lucky enough to be part of the Australian team for the Youth Commonwealth Games in 2004. And that was kind of an indicator to me that things were going pretty well. And I was basically at the top of the country's level in the juniors. So I felt that was kind of a stepping stone.
Prior to that, then, you were just going around going to competitions and beating people. That's how you got picked in the youth team to begin with?
Yes, basically. Okay. So the competition I was playing in was like national competition. So I started at local competitions initially, and then I started to go well in those. I started to play some state tournaments, and then once I made the Victorian team, then we started to play in national tournaments. And it was from the results from the national tournaments that counted towards the selection towards the Youth Commonwealth Games. So at that stage, I was really into it. I was training before and after school. I was loving it, and I still do love it.
Yeah.
The commitment early on, even when I was in primary school, was very high. But it felt, I don't know, I just loved to play, so I didn't really feel like that much. It wasn't a chore for me. I just loved to train. I loved to play, and that kind of just fed into my motivation and my drive to keep improving. And then I started going really well at the competitions. And then from there, I started to make some state teams, some national teams. And from there, it was just a slow progression into the junior national team and then the backup senior national team. And then that's how I ended up with the Commonwealth Games and things like that.
Oh, how old were you when you got in the first Commonwealth Games?
I was 22.
So were you right towards the end of dentistry then?
No, that was only in my second year of dentistry.
Oh, right, okay.
So long story short is after I finished year 12, I actually took 3 years off university to pursue my dream of playing for Australia at the Olympic Games. Unfortunately, after spending, so I spent 3 years full time just playing badminton, training, eating, sleeping. Literally, that's all I did: train, eat, sleep, and play badminton for about 3 years. And we'd travel around the world doing tours and playing all the international circuits and things like that.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, the goal was to reach be selected for the 2008 Beijing Olympics. But unfortunately, I was literally the next person in line to go. So unfortunately, that didn't work out for me. But I had 3 years of training and everything. And yeah, exactly. And so when I was going for the Olympics and I was 20, because it was in 2008 in Beijing. And when the Commonwealth Games came around, I was still playing, I was still training a lot, but I had that 3-year base of really focusing on the sport in itself, where I could get to the top of my level, and then I was able to hold that through university, even though it was very busy and very difficult. So it was a big decision to make. Yeah.
So you finished dentistry, did you keep competing after that, or did you stop?
Yes. Yep. So I finished dentistry in 2013, and then in 2014, the very next year, I went to the Glasgow Commonwealth Games. And after that, I had a bit of a niggle with my hip, so I had a few injuries and things like that. And I actually came back and started playing men's doubles, and we had some good results. But then soon after that, we decided to just play a little bit more recreationally and for fun. That's what I do at the moment. So I still play quite a lot, but it's more just for fitness. It's great. It's a great workout, and I still love to play. And also, I also help the national team and some of the national players train as well by just helping them with certain sparring and things like that. So
sparring, you call it sparring?
Yeah, we call it sparring, where it's not actually, we're not hitting each other.
You put gloves on at the end of a game and they just they flog the crap out of each other. Yeah, no, we call it sparring. It's just basically having someone to play with that brings something different to the game. So I've got a lot of experience in the game, even though I'm probably not as fast or as powerful as I used to be, which I wish I was. But just having that level of experience and just being able to help the other players as well, because as a developing player, you try to focus on everything that you can, but there's always other things that you can't see that other people can see. Yeah.
And when someone's been playing a very long time, it's quite easy for me to see, hey, you need to improve this, or hey, this is something you need to think about when they're playing. So I try to help out in that way as well.
Is there an optimum age of badminton players?
Generally, it is in your 20s.
Yeah.
All the way up to your late 20s. There are some superstars that are still in their early 30s to mid 30s that are still playing exceptionally well.
So that's classed as being old. So being in your early 30s is classed as being old. In your early 30s, and if you're playing at high level badminton, it is relatively old. Wow. Yeah. Why is it? Is it just because you slow down? It's just purely an age thing?
Definitely do slow down because it's a sport that puts so much demand on your body, even if it doesn't look like it. There's so much jumping, there's so much leaping, there's start-stop movements, there's lots of Achilles tendon tears that happens a lot in badminton, knee, ACLs, shoulder problems, hip problems, back problems. It's everything all combined. So I think that the actual longevity of the players often will be a result of injuries over time as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing that plays a part in it, where people get injured from all of the movements and they can't sustain it, and then the young players with their young fit bodies come and take over. So, but yeah, don't get me wrong, there are definitely some really good players that are older, but I'll probably say 20 to 30 is where most of the top players lie.
But is it also one of those things too that it's, like you said, as you get older, you're prone to particular injuries. So therefore, the younger guy who's 24, who's rubbery and can play day after day after day and constantly train, and then you get the guy who's 35 who could potentially play one game against a 24-year-old and beat him, but could not do that 5 days in a row because there wouldn't be enough ice to put on their bodies to stop the swelling.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And I know for a fact that some of the Danish players, so Denmark is a very, very strong badminton nation. Yeah. And a lot of the players there, some of them they're the ones I'm talking about who are in their mid-30s that are still competing at very high levels. But when I spoke to actually one of the Danish coaches, he was saying that the training that they do is far, far different now. It's far more, because they've got such a solid base from the 10, 15, 20 years that they've been playing badminton. They focus on things that are of shorter duration and higher intensity, just so that the body has more time to recover. Yeah. And the way that they train is a lot different. A 35-year-old trains a lot different to a 20-year-old.
Well, I think that's every sport though. You'll have a look at like the NRL, the rugby league, or even AFL. You're down at if you study down in Melbourne, you've probably got a bit of AFL background as well. But you have a look at the players who are like over 30, who are getting towards the end of the career, and their coaches manage them differently. They're not out there training as hard as what the guy who's 22 is, because they've got this certain skill and certain base that they already have, and it's just maintaining that and getting the best out of them by adapting their training. So how have you found going through this whole process of being a professional athlete and transitioning into dentistry and having your own business? Did that make you, do you feel those skills that you picked up and disciplines have helped you as a business person?
Absolutely. I couldn't question that whatsoever. I think the main one for me is just the ability to work hard and be disciplined. I think that's huge for an athlete, because especially when you're training full time, you're literally just waking up and training and doing that every single day. Yeah. So there's definitely days that you don't want to be doing it. And they always talk about the only growth that you have is the growing only starts when you don't want to do it anymore. And I think that's the big one, because when you're an athlete, there are definitely days where your body is aching, you don't want to do it, but then you have to do it and you just make yourself do it. And then that converted into studying. When you don't feel like studying, you don't want to do this, you don't want to do that, and you just make yourself do it. And there's just discipline. There's just a discipline that you get from being an athlete that really helps to build discipline in everything that you do. And there's no reason, there's no excuse, because when you're an athlete, you're always taught that you always need to be looking at what you can do, and if you need to change something, there's no giving up, because if you give up as an athlete, that's it. You're not an athlete anymore, and you always make a way. And I think that really has an effect on, say, business and academics as well, where you just keep going because you know you need to, and even if you don't feel like it, you've still got that drive.
So would you say, like, as a junior, when you were going through, there were probably guys who if you look back now, you sort of go, you know what, they were actually better than me. The only difference is they quit and I didn't quit, and I just kept going, kept improving. Yeah. And I think that happens even, like, I know when I was at different sport I've played, and some of the people who I thought at the time were fairly average, but went on and had pretty good sporting careers because they never quit and they were so determined to actually be a success. But also people who left school too early, who were really smart, people who dropped out of university, who were really clever but didn't have the discipline. And it probably happens in business as well, people who have their own business but just don't have the discipline to push themselves hard enough to get the results. Exactly,
yeah. I think it all intertwines with, say, especially in sport, with talent as well. There's a really, really talented player that they're so skillful, they're naturally so fast or so fit, or they can jump really high. Yeah. And they sometimes don't make it. And that's just because a lot of the times when someone is really, really talented, you can see that the way that they train and they develop themselves is a lot different, because when they're starting out, they're better than everyone and they don't need to work on that physical strength. They don't need to work really, really hard because everything comes easy.
Yeah.
But as you progress and as you get older, things tend to even up. And then all of a sudden that talented person says, oh no, this person, I'm not the best anymore. I have to work harder. And they don't have that grounding and that drive to keep doing it. And then they give up. And then that's where you see the person that maybe wasn't quite as talented at the start, but they've developed this demeanor that's really full of determination and motivation and discipline. Then they're the ones that overtake them, because they've got that drive and they've built that drive from a long time ago. So yeah, definitely see that where it doesn't look like they're the best person, but they end up being the best person just purely because they have that motivation and drive to keep going and never give up.
That is absolutely spot on. But I even look at my daughter, who does dancing. It seems to be 7 days a week, but I don't think it is. But it feels that way sometimes. But I think back to just 2 years ago, and there were some girls that used to dance who just naturally they just got it. They were just born with it. But I can see them as the years have gone on, how much improvement my daughter has had, because she is so determined to improve and she's practicing all the time.
Yep.
And I compare her to the other girls, and the other girls are still good. Yeah, I mean, they are still really good. But I can see my daughter slowly catching up to their level, that in another 2 years, if she keeps going the way that she is, I think she will be better than them if they don't start actually training harder now.
Exactly, yeah.
And not sort of just relying on their natural talent.
Their natural talent, yeah.
So you think in business, some people have natural talent in business and that makes them lazy, or they may come from I can put it, backgrounds where everything was just handed to them really easily. So when they went through university, everything was paid for, everything was laid out for them. They didn't have to have a part-time job. They didn't have to push themselves. They've just always had it easy. Do you think that can sometimes affect them in business?
Absolutely. I think it's just basically the same thing applied to something else, where if they've had it easy, because as we all know, running your own business is not easiest at the best of times. So, and it's something that's always, you need to be working hard at your business, or it takes a lot of time to be successful in your business. And when someone comes from a background of being, especially I'd say in dentistry, where a lot of the people, to get into dentistry, you have to be extremely smart.
Yeah.
And you have to get really, really high scores. And then when you actually get into dentistry, it's a huge learning curve that everyone goes through, because all of a sudden you're bunched up with all these people who are the smartest of the 1%, the top 1% of the 1%, where we're competing on over a minute percent for a score to get into the actual course. So all of a sudden you're put in a cohort like that, and all of a sudden you're not the best anymore, because usually when you go to your school, you're one of the top students, because that's what it takes.
That's true.
But then you're put together with all the other really top students. All of a sudden you're only getting passes instead of your A pluses and things like that. And that's something that really has an effect on a lot of people, because they're so used to being achievers, and all of a sudden they're being kind of knocked back a level when they have to try to climb their way back up. And if they don't have the base of the discipline and the drive to do that, they might give up. And you see a lot of people who actually quit dentistry because it's just too hard, even though it's definitely a lot of work, but it's something they could do if they had the right mindset for it. And if you talk about business in itself, I think it's a similar thing. I think it's especially when people get, say, handed businesses to them rather than having to build them up, where they think it's going to be easy, or they think everything's set out for them and they've had it given to them, and all of a sudden they realize it's a lot more work than they think it's actually going to be, and they don't have that ability to look deep within themselves and really push themselves and get things done. And can definitely get really overwhelming when you're owning your own business, and that can definitely make you want to give up. So if you don't have a base in it, or if you've been given it, or if something's been very easy along the way and something hits you hard and you don't have that ability to get back on your feet and keep going, then yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that happens a lot in business. You need to have a really good an ability to look within yourself and figure out what you need to do next. So just as an example, when you're talking about scraping through, so my first 2 years at university, because I was still training full time and everything like that.
Yeah.
So not full time, but still training a lot. I was okay. I was a very average student. I'd get some really high marks, and then I'd get basically some passes. And it took me basically 2 years to figure out how to study again, to how to be a good student and how to study. And then I was lucky enough that, well, not lucky, but I was happy that I figured it out. So for the next 3 years of my course, I was basically in the top 5 students in my class. And that jump wasn't that I got smarter or anything. It was just I learnt how I study the best, and everyone studies differently. But I think that that's something that is important for every part of your life, where you can analyze what works well for you, try a few things, test a few things. And as a marketer, you'd know all about that. You need to test a few things, figure out what actually works, and then go ahead with that one.
Okay, I like that point. So what you're saying, when people, even if whether they're studying at the moment or they're in business, if they're trying a few things and it's not working and they're not getting the exact results they need to go, okay, why aren't I getting the results, and start modifying and tweaking a few things until they start getting the results that they want. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And yeah, I must admit, when I was at uni, I was sort of probably a little bit sidetracked with sport and beer. I think those two things sort of, I was definitely not an elite athlete, but I did enjoy playing sport, and I did enjoy having a few drinks with friends. And that did interfere with me the first 2 years at uni as well. But it wasn't until the third year that I finally started getting my act together, and probably doing the same thing, realizing where you were making your mistakes a little bit, and probably having better time management was a big deal as well.
Absolutely. I think, when you develop as a student or as a human, and you learn to prioritize and figure out what's important. And once you do that, then you can really allocate your time a lot better. So
in business, how long after graduating from dentistry did you decide, that's it, I'm going to set up my own business? And what was your thinking behind it?
So it was 2014 when I first started work. I was a graduate dentist who I was employed by a dentist who was looking to retire in a few years, but unfortunately he actually got unwell and he wasn't actually able to practice after he hired me. So I actually came into the clinic as the principal dentist. So as a graduate principal dentist, which is a pretty big deal because, as you know, with a lot of health professions, but quite commonly you would try to choose a job where you have a mentor that helps you through your first 1-2 years at least.
Oh, definitely.
Just to get just because you learn a lot at university, but they always say that once you finish and graduate from university, that's when the real learning starts.
That's true.
And because when you're thrown into the real world. So I was kind of thrown into a position where the previous owner of the dental practice asked me whether I wanted to own the practice in, say, 2 or 3 years. So he had already planted the seed of me potentially owning the practice. But he didn't, of course, foresee that he would be unwell. Unfortunately, he actually passed away in my first year of work. So it was actually...
How old was he at the time when he passed away?
He was 69.
Which is not
very old by today's standards. Yeah, no. Absolutely. So that was in 2014. And so 3 years later in 2017, that's when I took ownership of the practice. I think the decision, it was always something I was considering, and the 3 years leading into actually owning the practice, I was kind of preparing myself for it because I was the principal dentist there, so I had to have an idea of how everything run anyway. And I had a lot of say in things like ordering and materials and kind of processes that happened in the practice in itself. So I think that was a good lead up to the actual ownership of the business.
Well, did you have any business mentors at the time while you were going through this, or were there any particular books that you were reading? You know, sometimes a mentor can be someone that they don't even know they're a mentor. So for me, for example, Zig Ziglar was always someone that from the time I first started working, I heard about this guy, and I read every book he wrote. Yeah, so he was like a massive mentor to me, even though I'd never met the guy and he didn't know who I was. So was there anybody that really influenced you in that way?
I think there's been a lot of people that influence me, and very similar to yourself, that don't actually know me, or I've listened to their things. I have listened to some Zig Ziglar stuff, and I listened to quite a bit of Tony Robbins stuff.
All right, yeah.
And I've been to lots of seminars and talks and all that kind of stuff, where I kind of got into an entrepreneurial kind of mindset in probably about a year to year and a half before I actually took over the practice, and I actually tried to develop my own app, and that was a bit of a flop, which is a bit of a funny story. But yeah, so that was a bit of a flop. But during the process, I learned just so much about business and writing business, not just business plans, but looking at all the ways that you can be innovative and you can. So I think I wouldn't say one particular person, but I definitely had a lot of information that I was consuming. I was reading lots of books as well. And
is there any one book that really stands out?
I'm quite of as a person, I like to find deeper meaning in a lot of things. So rather than just doing things just for the sake of it, finding deeper meaning. And I found that it's not really how to run your business, but there's a book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why. I'm not sure if you've heard of it before.
I think I have it on my shelf.
Delves into different companies like Apple, and they're just talking about what the actual why is. So what's the deeper meaning? What's the purpose behind the business? Like, not just to make money. What's the actual deeper meaning? Yeah. And it's from that where you figure out how you're going to do it and what you're actually going to do. But you need to always start with the why. So you need to figure out what the purpose is of doing it. Because if you've got a strong enough why, then everything along the way kind of paves in itself. So if you take, for example, my sporting career in badminton, my why was always to play for Australia. It was when I watched the Olympics, I think it was the 96 Atlanta Olympics, where I was thinking, that's going to be me. I'm definitely going to do that 100%. Yeah. And that was my strong why. So once you develop your why, then you have so much clarity in what you need to do, because you've got a purpose. And then all of a sudden, training, playing all the tournaments and the competitions and all that kind of stuff, that just comes naturally as part of the why. And I think that's where a lot of people lose the drive and lose motivation, is when they say set a goal and they say, I want to make, I'm not sure, X amount of money, $100,000 for example. Yeah. It just stops there. They don't figure out why they actually want it. Do they want to do it because they want to buy a car for their parents or their family? Or if people figure out their why and they are clear about why they actually want something, all of a sudden the drive behind it becomes a little bit more natural. So I think that book really helped me with, it was more company based and business based about a business's vision and their why and why they actually exist. But I think it's something that you can use in everyday life with your personal goals and things like that as well.
Okay, and then you mentioned too that you were listening to podcasts. Were there certain podcasts that you listened to that you went, yeah, I like listening to this because this is the information I get from it?
Yeah, the podcasts themselves were not, to be honest, they weren't particularly business based. They were definitely personal development based. So I did listen to a lot of Tony Robbins podcasts, and I'm a big fan of his work. And there's a lot of business things in his podcasts as well. So they range from, say, your values to actually your business and how to run your business, how to be innovative and things like that. And he'd tend to, on these podcasts, he would interview people who have written their own books about their certain niches. And that was really interesting for me. I listened to those kinds of things. I also listened to like mindset podcasts just about, say, especially beliefs. I think beliefs is a huge one where beliefs are things that can really limit and sabotage where you actually set your sights to. So a lot of Tony Robbins stuff, and there's a guy called Jim Quick, and he has these really short podcasts of how to do this, how to think about this, and I listen to a lot of short things like that. So
no, I think that's good, because I think sometimes people will have a business and they've got these blinkers on that I must learn everything about business. So they devour all this business information, and at no time do they do anything about their attitude and their mindset. So they can have all the knowledge and then apply nothing because their mindset, they have limiting beliefs telling them that, you know what, no one in my family's ever been successful, or I couldn't possibly have $1 million business one day. So therefore, they can have all the tools in front of them on how to have a fantastic business.
Exactly.
But they're convincing themselves that they can't do it. So I think that's spot on advice, that get stuck into the mindset stuff and positive. And that's why I always like Zig Ziglar and the positive thinking.
Yep. Because unfortunately, if you don't start with the belief, like you said, if you've got everything else, nothing's going to work. As in, you can implement things, but if without a belief, the way you implement things is going to be 110% different than if you actually believe it. So if you believe, if I don't believe that this marketing strategy is going to work, then how much effort or how much drive am I going to have to make it good? Or if I'm recording a video and I don't think it's going to work, then how much enthusiasm am I going to be giving and showing on the video compared to if I actually believe it's going to work? So I think belief is something you really need to start off with.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good thing. Start with belief and then just build everything else sort of around that. So what's next? What's next for Jeff?
So next for me is that I'll be working with yourself, which I'm excited, not directly working with you, but I'll be working with Dr. Jesse Green and helping some dental practice owners really develop and build their dental practices up. And I'm really excited for that. And I'll be getting started soon with that. And I'm actually going into a little bit of personal coaching as well. So basically personal coaching through webinars and live events and coaching, where I'm helping people basically set and hit their goals in a very structured and step-by-step way, and also being able to plan that into their schedule. So what I found was a lot of people don't have the mindset. So the belief is the really important one.
So is this taking some of your skills as well as an elite athlete?
Absolutely.
And taking what you've learned from that and helping people use those skills in their own life?
Yes.
Cool.
Absolutely. There's so many things I've learned from being an athlete from a lot of coaches. I've also been fortunate enough to have, say, personal life coaches in the past as well. So I'm taking everything that I've learned from them, and also everything that I've learned from all the material I've consumed. And I'm trying to help people, develop their mindset and to set and achieve their goals. So it's very broad, I know, to say set and achieve goals, but having a way to actually set them in a way that you find your why as to why you want to do them, and actually developing a plan as to how you're going to do it. And then from there, actually planning it into your calendar and not just leaving it on a piece of paper and saying, I'll do those one day, but actually having them in your calendar, lock them in. And that's something that coaching is really important for, I think, is to keep people accountable, because everyone can have the best intentions, but when push comes to shove, if there's no one telling you that you need to get something done, and you can easily fall back into old habits, laziness, procrastinations, and things like that. So I'm looking to get into that kind of space where I'm coaching people through the setting of the goals, plus also the implementation, because as we all know, the implementation is the most important thing. And especially what you said about the information we have access to these days. There's so much information out there, from podcasts to internet. Like, we can get anything at the click of our fingers. But I think that with that comes the analysis paralysis kind of thing. So if you read every single business book and you don't actually do any of it, it all just becomes a theory. And if you know too much about something, it's good to know a lot, but if you know a lot and don't implement it, then it just becomes a stack of knowledge that can give you paralysis, and you think, what am I going to do? I need to be perfect, blah, blah, blah. But we should never let perfection get in the way of progress. So we need to make sure we take some of what we learn and actually do it. And if it works, awesome, keep doing it. If it doesn't work, oh well, move to the next thing. And I think that's really big, where people can have all the information in the world about any particular topic, whether it's business, whether it's achieving goals, whether it's how to be an athlete, whether it's blah, blah, blah. But if they don't actually put it into practice, then that's where the magic happens, and nothing is going to happen if you've got all the plans set out and all your goals set and everything like that, but you don't actually put them into action and actually do them.
Yeah, well, I've had two people. Well, there was Paul Wright, who was on my podcast early last year, and he said a thing that I thought was great, and it was like, done is better than perfect. Well, he used to say, done and out the door is better than perfect and in the drawer.
Yes.
And he used to say, as long as it's 80 or 90% perfect, just get it out there. You can fix up the rest of it later, but just get it out there and get it working. And then I had another guy that I spoke to recently, Tony Gavin, who's a podiatrist in the UK, and he's like my first guest on my other podcast called Podiatry Legends. And he said a lot of people say to him, geez, Tony, you achieve so much. How do you achieve so much? And he says, only about 10% of the things I do actually work. He says, but I just do a lot. And he just constantly just does things, gets it out there, and if it fails, he kills it off and just goes on to the next thing. And just, if he says he's going to do something, he does it, gets it out there, and it works. People see it, and that's great. He puts it out and it doesn't work, he kills it and just moves on to the next thing. And he's constantly just doing, not just always just thinking about maybe I'll do it. So I think that's a really good point. So if somebody sets goals, they want to. What would be the first thing you would tell them to do?
I think the first thing to do is to get into to understand yourself a bit more, to get into the mindset thing. Because I think that if you go and set your goals and you haven't had a good chance to review your mindset, review what your actual limiting beliefs are and how to actually overcome them, or have a way to manage them when they actually come up, no matter what you do with your goals, no matter what goals you actually set for yourself, you're not going to get them done at the same level as if you had that belief at the start. So I would say mindset is the most important thing. And a lot of the times, a lot of people will say, well, I've had this belief for ages and ages. I can't change it. It's just part of me. But this is when I try to blow it out of the water and just say, look, a belief is just a neural connection. It's just a connection that you make between one event and another, and you just made a story in between to actually make it a belief for yourself. So I say to them, look, do you still believe in Santa Claus? Because a lot of people, I believed in Santa when I was a kid, and all of a sudden,
if there's kids in the car, I'm going to have to put a little warning in here now. If there's kids in the car, can you please turn it off now? Come back to it when the kids get out.
All right, sorry about that.
I'm just joking.
Basically what I'm saying is that if you've had a belief and you've had a belief like Santa, for example, he may actually exist, but all of a sudden then the belief could be changed once you realize something or once you did something. So it's just a neural connection. So a lot of people will say to me, a belief is really, really hard to change. I'm like, yes, because that neural connection's been built so many times. It's like a super highway rather than another belief where you have to actually you have to think about it a lot to actually even start to believe it. But it's all about trying to trigger something. It's all about trying to change that story between the stimulus, the trigger, and what you actually think about it. And so I think the belief is a huge one, because that's going to affect the way that you set your goals and you start planning your days and you start doing everything. So that's where I'll definitely start. If you kind of are at the stage where you've managed the belief or you understand about that, I think what I said before about figuring out what the actual why is for your goals, because I find that a lot of people set their goals, especially around this time, New Year's resolutions. They have all the best intentions. I want to lose 10 kilos, but why? What is the actual drive behind it? Because if you don't have a strong enough why, then it's so easy to go back on what you actually plan and the goals that you set. So if you say, if someone said to me, for example, I want to lose 10 kilos because I want to fit in a pair of jeans. That's awesome. That's a good why, but there's something even stronger. What if you said, look, I want to fit in this suit and I want to look really good for my child's graduation. All of a sudden the why is a lot stronger because it's related to someone else that you really care about. So if you can figure out how to really trigger your why and make it a little bit more.
Is it relating it to an emotion, connecting it to an emotion?
Made to an emotion. Yeah. Having more of an emotion to it. Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. My final question is usually a Monday morning tip, but I think you answered that on about the beliefs and having a big why, but we'll do it anyway. It's Monday morning, someone bumps into you and they go, Jeff, I'm about to walk into work. When I sit down at my desk, what's the number one thing you reckon that I should do today?
That would be, so when you go to your desk and you sit down at your desk and you want to have something that's going to kickstart your day and it's going to make you motivated to do the best that you can do.
Yeah.
Think about the person that you want to be and that you're becoming. So one of my coaches actually said to me, Jeff, what would the person you're becoming do? So let's just say you've set a goal and you want to be the top salesperson in your company, for example. You need to figure out what the identity of that person is. How do they speak on the phone? how do they act when they're at the desk? Are they slunched over? Are they upset they're at work, or are they up and ready? Are they enthused? Are they ready to start the day and ready to sell to people and ready to get into action? So I think a really good takeaway is your identity. So who do you identify yourself to be? And if you want to be someone better than you are tomorrow than you are today, which I assume that everyone, if you listen to this podcast, and I'm sure you do, then you need to assume the characteristics and the personality of the person tomorrow. So like I said, if you can identify who you want to be and you live that today, you're going to get to that spot a lot faster than if you just be the way that you are today. So I think identity is huge. If you identify yourself as successful, huge, unstoppable, powerful, then you're going to act in a different way than if you went to work and you just thought that today was just another day.
That is a perfect answer. That is what I was hunting for and digging down into and trying to drag out of you. So that is great. So Jeff, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they get hold of you? How can they stalk you while you're sleeping at night?
They can definitely stalk me on Facebook. On Facebook, you just need to search Dr. So Dr. Jeffrey, Jeffrey, and Tho, my surname, Tho. So Dr. Jeffrey Tho on Facebook, and also drjeffreytho.com. On my website, I'll be hosting webinars and also details for live events that you can come to as well, and they'll be free, and they'll be based in Melbourne. So if you can't make it to the Melbourne live events, and that's no problem, I'll be holding the webinars, so you can jump on there. You can contact me through any of those two mediums, and I'd love to hear from any of you.
Okay, that's cool. And are you on LinkedIn and Twitter as well, or just Facebook?
I'm on LinkedIn as just Dr. Jeffrey Tho as well.
Okay, but not Twitter and Instagram? People can't hunt you down on Instagram?
On Instagram, I've just actually made one, so it's Dr. Jeffrey Tho as well.
Okay.
But I don't have a Twitter account at all.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, some of the social media platforms, they do annoy me a little bit, but sometimes you just got to be there because you don't know where people are going to find you. But I think the important part is understand your audience, and you'll know where your audience hide, and that's where you need to be.
Exactly, that's right. Hopefully they're on Facebook for now.
Well,
Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn.
Yeah, they'll be there. So Jeff, thank you very much for being on It's No Secret Dr. T. This has been good. I've learned heaps. Hope you've enjoyed yourself, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. Thanks a lot, Tyson.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to Dr. Jeffrey Tho today. And there's a couple of points I just want to go over one more time. And one was about natural talent only goes so far. And as Jeffrey explained, as you get older, things start to even up. And even the ones that actually make it, are the ones that never give up. And I think that applies to whether it's sport, business, and life in general. The second point I think was really worth mentioning again is start with why. Is understand why you're doing what it is that you do. When you're setting goals, understand why you're setting that goal. It's not just to achieve probably that thing that you tell people. There's usually a deeper reason. So just keep that in mind. And I think the third thing was around that Monday morning tip. And it was thinking about who is the person that you want to be. And when you think about that person, is think about what actions would that person do. When they're sitting at your desk on a Monday morning, what would the person you want to be do right now? And then go and actually do it. So I got a lot out of today's conversation, and I hope you did as well. So my guest next week is Yanni Olunga. And when it comes to podcasting, he knows everything about podcasting. He is a podcast expert, and he teaches a lot of people in that particular space. But what we're talking about in particular is why you should become a podcast guest, all the benefits of being a podcast guest. Now, if you listen to this show on a regular basis, you may have heard up to almost 100 guests that I've had on the show. And most of them might be just sharing some of their thoughts and ideas, but it's a great way to build your personal and business brand. And that's just some of the things we touch on. Here's a little snippet of what's coming up next week.
Think about what is the goal. So sure, think about the goal for the audience. So by the time you're finished with the episode, what do you want the audience to walk away with? But also for you personally as a guest, what is the ideal outcome you want to get out of the interview? Is it to simply have a fun conversation? Is it to grow your network, so connect with the host on platforms like, LinkedIn or Twitter? Is it to promote a book you have coming out? Is it to promote your coaching services? Is it to promote a conference you're speaking at, and so forth?
I must admit, I had a great time talking to Jan, and it's not a short interview either. We talked for at least an hour in next week's episode, but we don't talk about all the benefits of being a podcast guest. We also touch on some of the equipment and the setup that you should have if you want to be a professional guest, because it's not about just jumping on a recording and start talking. You need to have things set up the right way so you sound good. If you've listened to a lot of podcasts in the past on my show, you would have heard different guests would sound slightly different, and I do my best to try and make them sound as good as what I can. But sometimes it depends on their setup. But I must say, majority of my guests have been pretty damn good. But I've listened to some podcasts, and you'd swear the guest is sitting in a prison cell, and it's just and the words are just bouncing off the wall. So just keep that in mind. And if you've ever thought about being a podcast guest, next week's episode, you definitely need to tune into it. And even if it's not podcast guesting, if you just want to do better recordings, we do talk about some of the equipment that you actually need. Now, if you have any thoughts after listening to today's podcast, please, I'd love to hear from you. You can always send me an email, tf@tysonfranklin.com. And remember, you can always check out my website, tysonfranklin.com as well. Otherwise, you can track me down on Twitter and Instagram. Just look for tysonfranklin66. And if you've been enjoying this podcast after the past few weeks or months, we've been going for a year and a half now, and you like the content that it brings you each week, please, would love a review on iTunes if you feel like giving us one. But please subscribe. If you subscribe, you don't have to worry about looking for the show. It'll automatically just turn up on your smartphone or however you actually listen. And finally, before I go, remember, just share the love. Tell your friends and family about the show. Let them know that this actually exists. So that's it from me this week. Look after yourself, look after your family, and I will talk to you again next week. Bye for now.